The perfect baby shower, glowing mom-to-be. But when I touched her belly, at 47, I thought I understood what family meant. My wife Catherine and I had built what seemed like a perfect life in our suburban Denver home. She ran her freelance marketing consultancy from our converted garage office, while I worked as a cardiologist at Presbyterian Medical Center. We'd been trying to have children for 3 years, but that November morning, watching my sister-in-law Rebecca's radiant smile as she cradled her 8-month pregnant belly, I felt nothing but pure joy for the family we were about to welcome. Rebecca taught second grade at Riverside Elementary, beloved by every child who walked through her classroom door. She'd married Daniel, a financial advisor, 4 years ago, and this pregnancy had brought an electricity to our entire family that I'd never experienced before. The way her eyes lit up when she talked about becoming a mother, the careful way she moved through our kitchen that crisp autumn morning, everything about her radiated this beautiful maternal glow that made my heart swell with anticipation. The baby's been so active lately, Rebecca laughed, placing both hands on her rounded belly as Catherine poured her herbal tea. I swear this little one is going to be a gymnast. Feel this. She guided my hand to where a tiny foot was supposedly pushing against her skin. What I felt in that moment would haunt me for months to come. But in that kitchen, surrounded by the warmth of family love, I had no idea I was touching the beginning of our family's most devastating nightmare. We'd spent weeks planning the perfect baby shower. Catherine, with her eye for design, had created these stunning watercolor invitations by hand, soft pastels with elegant calligraphy that read, "Welcome, little one." Every detail had been meticulously planned, from the lemon cake Rebecca had loved since childhood to the balloon arch that Daniel and I had assembled at dawn. 35 family members and friends were expected, and the community center had been transformed into something that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The morning of the shower, I arrived early to do final preparations. The pastel balloons caught the autumn sunlight streaming through the tall windows, creating this dreamlike atmosphere that seemed perfect for celebrating new life. Rebecca's favorite white roses and pale pink gerberas filled crystal vases throughout the room. Everything looked absolutely flawless. When Rebecca arrived that afternoon, wearing a flowing emerald maternity dress that made her absolutely radiant, the joy in that room was infectious. Her light brown hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and pregnancy had given her this luminous quality that made everyone smile just looking at her. She moved slowly but gracefully, one hand always supporting her belly in that protective way expectant mothers do. "This is incredible," she whispered, tears of happiness welling in her eyes as she took in the transformed space. "I can't believe you did all this for us." The guests began arriving in waves, her teaching colleagues with their warm smiles and gentle voices, neighbors who'd watched her marriage to Daniel bloom, relatives from both sides of the family, all carrying beautifully wrapped gifts and expressions of genuine excitement. The room filled with that special energy that only comes when people gather to celebrate something truly precious. Everyone wanted to feel the baby move, and Rebecca, glowing with happiness, welcomed each touch with pure delight. "She's so active today," she kept saying, guiding hands to different spots on her belly. "I think she knows this party is for her." The guests would exclaim with wonder at what they felt, sharing stories of their own pregnancies and children, creating this beautiful tapestry of maternal wisdom and family love. But when it was my turn to place my hand on her belly, my world tilted off its axis. 22 years of medical experience had taught me to recognize the subtle signs that others miss. What everyone else interpreted as a baby's movement felt wrong under my fingertips, terribly, devastatingly wrong. The positioning, the rhythm, the way her abdomen responded to pressure, none of it aligned with what I should have been feeling from a healthy 8-month fetus. My initial smile faded as I pressed more carefully, moving my hand to different areas, hoping desperately that I was mistaken. But every professional instinct I'd developed over 2 decades of delivering babies was screaming the same horrifying message. The movements Rebecca and our guests were feeling weren't fetal movements at all. I pulled Catherine aside with what I hoped looked like casual urgency, but inside, my professional instincts were screaming warnings I desperately wanted to ignore. The cheerful sounds of the party laughter, conversations about cribs and college funds, the gentle clinking of teacups, suddenly felt surreal, like we were all participating in some elaborate performance, while something unspeakable lurked just beneath the surface. "We need to call an ambulance," I whispered, my voice barely controlled. Right now. The look of confused terror in Catherine's eyes mirrored what I was feeling. "What are you talking about? Everyone's having such a wonderful time. Rebecca looks perfect." "That wasn't fetal movement," I said, each word feeling like I was breaking something precious and irreparable. "Catherine, the baby." I couldn't finish the sentence that would shatter everything we thought we knew about this perfect day. The ambulance sirens cutting through the autumn air marked the end of one story and the beginning of another one that would test everything we believed about love, family, and the lengths we'll go to protect the people we care about most. As the paramedics carefully helped Rebecca into the wheelchair, her face showed the first flickers of confusion and fear. The beautiful party we'd spent weeks planning dissolved into chaos as guests gathered their purses and whispered worried questions to each other. At the hospital, Dr. Williams, my colleague and one of the most experienced obstetricians in the state, confirmed what my hands had already told me. After running ultrasounds and examining Rebecca thoroughly, he delivered the news that would shatter our world completely. The baby had died 3 weeks earlier. The medical records showed that Rebecca had been brought to the emergency room after falling downstairs while Daniel was away on business. She'd been told about the fetal death by the attending physician, given information about her options, and had walked out of the hospital refusing to accept the diagnosis. For 3 weeks, she'd lived in a beautiful delusion, planning nursery colors, buying tiny clothes, feeling what she believed were her baby's movements, and preparing for the shower that was supposed to celebrate the life growing inside her. But there was no life. There hadn't been for weeks. What Rebecca and all our party guests had interpreted as an active, healthy baby were actually intestinal movements and muscle spasms, her body's way of processing the loss while her mind created an elaborate fantasy to protect her from unbearable grief. Watching my sister-in-law's carefully constructed reality crumble in that sterile hospital room was like witnessing a soul break in real time. The way she looked at us, confused, betrayed, desperate when we couldn't validate the life she felt so certain was growing inside her, taught me something profound about the human heart's capacity for both self-protection and devastating vulnerability. But I felt her moving. Rebecca whispered, tears streaming down her face as the truth finally penetrated the walls she'd built around her grief. She was so active at the party. Everyone felt her. You felt her too, didn't you? She searched my face desperately for confirmation of the reality she'd constructed. Daniel, who had been completely unaware of the hospital visit 3 weeks earlier, sat beside her bed in stunned silence. The guilt on his face was heartbreaking. He'd been traveling for work, building their financial future, while his wife had carried this unimaginable grief entirely alone, creating a world where her dreams could still come true. The recovery took months. Rebecca spent time at a specialized facility that dealt with complicated grief and psychological trauma, working with therapists who helped her process not just the loss of her baby, but the guilt and confusion of having created such an elaborate escape from reality. The human mind's ability to protect itself from unbearable pain, the doctors explained, sometimes manifests in ways that seem impossible, but are actually quite common in cases of profound loss. Daniel blamed himself for being absent during her darkest moment, for missing the signs that his wife was drowning in grief she couldn't process. Catherine and I questioned every assumption we'd made about recognizing when someone we love is struggling, wondering how we'd missed the depth of Rebecca's pain while being so focused on sharing her apparent joy. Those months taught me that grief isn't linear, that healing doesn't follow a schedule, and that love sometimes means sitting with someone in their darkest places without trying to fix or rush them through their pain. We took turns visiting Rebecca, bringing her favorite books, sitting quietly while she worked through therapy sessions, and slowly rebuilding the trust that had been shattered when her carefully constructed world collapsed. But here's what I learned about family during those long, painful months. Real love isn't just celebrating the beautiful moments together. It's sitting in hospital waiting rooms at 3 in the morning. It's holding someone while they grieve for dreams that will never come true. It's finding ways to honor loss without letting it define your future. The turning point came 6 months later, during one of our regular family dinners. Rebecca, who had been mostly silent for weeks, suddenly looked up from her plate and said, "I want to teach again. The children need me, and I think I need them too." Returning to her second grade classroom became part of Rebecca's healing process. Being surrounded by young lives, watching children learn and grow and discover their own resilience, reminded her that life continues even after devastating loss. Her students, with their innocent wisdom and unconditional affection, helped her remember who she was beyond her grief. 18 months later, Rebecca and Daniel made a decision that showed me the true meaning of courage. They chose to adopt 7-year-old Emma, a little girl who'd been waiting in foster care for a family to call her own. Emma had her own story of lost parents who couldn't care for her, multiple placements that hadn't worked out, and a wariness of adults that came from too much disappointment. The day Emma first called Rebecca Mom, I understood that families aren't just created through biology, they're forged through intentional love, conscious choice, and the willingness to rebuild hope from the ashes of broken dreams. Watching Rebecca braid Emma's hair before school, helping with homework at our kitchen table, reading bedtime stories with the same gentle patience she'd always shown her students, it was clear that motherhood had found its way to her through a different path than anyone had expected. Emma brought her own special energy to our family gatherings. She was curious about everything, asked endless questions, and had this remarkable ability to find joy in simple moments that reminded all of us to pay attention to the small miracles happening around us every day. Her laughter filled spaces that had been quiet for too long. Last Christmas, as I watched Emma help Rebecca frost sugar cookies in our kitchen, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin with the most devastating endings. The baby shower that nearly destroyed our family ultimately taught us that love multiplies when it's shared, that healing happens in community, and that the families we choose can be just as powerful as the ones we're born into. Emma, now 9 years old and thriving in 4th grade, has brought a completeness to Rebecca and Daniel's life that feels both surprising and inevitable. She calls Catherine and me aunt and uncle with the same natural affection. She shows her adoptive parents and has seamlessly woven herself into the fabric of our family story. That experience changed how I practice medicine, how I love my wife, and how I understand the delicate balance between hope and reality that we all navigate every single day. When I examine pregnant patients now, I'm more attuned not just to their physical condition, but to the emotional complexity of carrying hope for a future that isn't guaranteed. I've learned to ask different questions, to notice signs of distress that might be hidden beneath excitement, and to understand that sometimes the people who seem most joyful are the ones carrying the heaviest burdens. Rebecca's journey through loss and back to joy reminded me that resilience isn't about avoiding heartbreak. It's about finding ways to let your heart break open instead of just breaking apart. Her story taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting or moving on, but rather learning to carry love and loss together, creating space for both grief and gratitude to coexist. The baby who never took a breath is still part of our family story. Rebecca keeps a small memorial garden in her backyard, with forget-me-nots and white roses that bloom every spring. Emma helps tend it, understanding in her wise way that some love stories are brief but no less important, and that families can honor what was lost while embracing what has been found. If you've ever loved someone through their darkest moment, you know that sometimes the greatest gift we can give isn't fixing their pain, but simply refusing to let them carry it alone. And if you've ever witnessed someone rebuild their life from the ground up, you understand that hope isn't about expecting things to return to how they were, but about discovering what becomes possible when we're brave enough to start again.